Ja, herzlichen Dank für die Einführung. Herzlichen Dank für die Einladung.
Thank you very much for inviting me, and thank you very much for the introduction. I am here today as someone who comes from the practical work, and I would like to give you some insights in our work. And I'm going to show two double packages, so to speak, so double packages of projects which are relatively closely linked to each other. And the first has something to do with the universal space, and the second one has something to do with the specific or the, architecture that can be appropriated. Well, the image of the universal space is probably very closely linked to the name Mies van der Rohe. And there is this fantastic series of pictures from the Belgian photographer Marie-Françoise Plissard, who in 2004 in the Biennale had an exhibition with her photographs from Kinshasa, from the forest, which can take the role of an office and can also be a cluster of hairdressers' offices, or where the forest is less dense. It can also be the office of a newspaper. And so this space which encompasses everything, which creates the space, which gives shadow, and which can become several functions, several rooms, which is characterized by its grid of trees, is a very good example for something that can take different functions, that is very open in terms of its usage. Much stronger so than the probably most common, most well-known example, the crown held by Mies van der Rohe. And this forest in Kinshasa is a very important example for us. And now I would like to start with a short introduction to one of our buildings where we reflected a lot on the universal space. It's a production facility in Poland, which was finished in 2006. And, well, the contemporary industrial building is certainly something like this. It's the mono block. So this form that we see in many forms, and so this example is something very typical for the architecture and the design. It creates a very neutral space for several usages. You get light from above. It can be used for children's play areas. It can be used for furniture sales or for other uses. But the specific aspect of this universal architecture is the sign, the brand name. If the occupier goes elsewhere, then this brand name changes, of course. This is a photograph by a photographer from Cologne, and this shows this aspect very nicely. And we were asked in this context of contemporary industrial construction to design a building which had relatively simple requirements. It was meant to be some kind of manufacturing hall, and there's a table, there are shelves, and we were asked and tried to develop small cells, which are something like the basic information of this building. And starting from these small units, we tried to create a larger structure. We knew that approximately 70 people were supposed to work there, and that the maximum size was limited to 2,000 square meters. And so here it is about tables and shelves, and you have to find ways in between. And we tried out several floor plans, and in the end we came up with a round building that can be furnished in very different ways, which has some specific information like this entrance. There we have certain climatization, air conditioning conditions for the packaging, and there are specifics for the sanitary equipment. But otherwise, the room is very uniform, is lighted from above. And, we have here these pillars, and the major part of the building is a wood structure. And, well, we have a little steel inside so that we guarantee natural lighting of this space. Seen from the outside, so this building was relatively cheap, and one major benefit was the natural lighting, and through the roof. It is situated in Słubice in Poland, in one of the industrial zones, which is close to the train line leading from Berlin to Warsaw. And when we completed this building, we wanted to continue working with this idea, with what information we needed about a certain space so that it can become more than what the architects had thought of in the beginning. And we wanted to know how this empty room can be filled with something that is unforeseen, how many things we have to take into consideration and place on top of each other. And we continued this approach with a competition in which we took place when the building was completed. And this is the library, one of the fantastic examples of building projects, because we can use the books to design the space and the room. So this is an example of a library which was created with books. And, the room is the books. And the space program for the Czech library, which was an extension of the existing building, and we were supposed to build an extension for approximately 1 million of books. And we had the idea to use the books to create the room. This was not the idea in the beginning. In the beginning, only 10% of the building were supposed to be open to the public, the rest only a storage room for books. And, we had the books and we had the room, and we thought that the space could also be used for other purposes, because in the beginning we do not yet have 1 million of books. And as long as there are no 1 million of books, the space is still relatively empty and will become fuller and fuller over time. And therefore we designed a relatively simple building, 280 by 280 meters, rectangular building. This is located in Prague, opposite to the castle in Prague. And if you look at this section here, you can see what a building is like. It tries to create some structure for the project. We have these parts, these very dense parts with the books, and then we have the higher stories that are open for the public, and then there are areas where these two levels are in communication with each other. And then we have these packages, so to speak, of the lower non-public stories and the higher public stories. And if you look at the floor plan, you can see the grid mania that we followed here. And you can see that all parts of the building find their place in this structure and can find their place within the structure, but you can also have a completely different use. I mean, you could also use it for cars, for instance, as long as it is not completely filled, because, of course, there are lifts in the building and ventilation facilities, etc. So the story below is a storage story, and the next large public story is the piano mobile, as it is called. This is the large reading space, and around this there are relatively small areas where books are available, and the access is from here. And then there are these holes in the floor that allow a view to the next story, so that you can still see the many books that are stored in the building, even though they are not in the room itself. You can also go down to the books and the other regular cylinders support the building, and there are interior yards where light comes in. And this is the story underneath, and another public story where you have the lecture hall with a view to the river and the rest of storage facilities. And below this again are loads of books. And in the very end, and this is the last reference story, where the second copy of everything that has ever been published in the Czech language is stored. And you can see the structure from outside. You see the windows, and you can see the stories where you have only very little windows because the books don't like light. And this could have become a lot of things, this building. You could also imagine some researchers working in this room, or you could imagine any other sort of offices or warehouse or whatever. And one of our theses in the planning phase was about the question how we can succeed in not repeating the mistakes of modernism, or to create an architecture which is open to all sorts of uses that we don't know yet. So it's the principle of ambivalence. It's, well, the possibility to change things over time. And we try to think of as many processes as possible to put them on top of each other. And one nice example for this is this diagram, this chart. It reminds of Christopher Alexander's diagram, where you can see here this planning process which improves the tool over time. And so we start from that. This comes from the Surrealistic Manifesto, this drawing, and this says that you cannot only think on one level, but that you have to switch levels. So the idea that we are in a three-dimensional space, and if we put several functional ideas on top of each other, this might make it possible that architecture becomes more ambivalent. And well, the second double package about which I would like to talk is a project that works with void spaces more so than the universal spaces. And well, the first project is called Grundbau and Siedler, and we devised this for the International Building exhibition in Hamburg. And we used one of the most universal building principles of the present day. It's a building by Le Corbusier, which is certainly the most successful project ever. And we use this for the city quarter of Hamburg, which is called Wilhelmsburg. And we looked at this part of the building by Tessenau, and we combine these two. And there are self-built elements on the upper floors. We thought about Peter and Alison Smithson's, and we can see here how that they are standing in front of the building, the proud owners of it. But our building can more than just a raw structure. There is water, there is a rail outside, and it has the potential for becoming more. And the floor plan is not just an empty skeleton, but we have here a specific pillar structure so that you can create different rooms from that. There's a lift in the middle, and which gives access to the stories. And you can see that everything which is shown here in black and white is the basic structure, and the rest is then done by the inhabitants, so, which means that they can decide themselves what kind of ceiling or floor they want to have. They can be completely independent of the other inhabitants. Well, I try to be brief. And in our understanding, there is a spatial design that can be appropriated, and so we use the spatial structure of rooms as our basis, and we did not define the purpose of this room. So it can become a bathroom, a hallway, a children's room, and in most of the times the inhabitants they chose an open structure for their flat, and the details are in such a way that it is very easy to use it. And so here you can see the end result, a relatively good building. And they wanted us to create the facade, so they did not choose to individualize the facade. And now I have only very little time left to explain this last project. It is a project in Königsberger Straße and Aleppoer Weg. And we were invited to the Biennale in Venice and wanted to transfer this to the urban scale. The question was what happens in Germany with the immigration. So Germany is a country where there's a lot of need for and demand for new housing. And starting from this situation, we looked at a similar situation that existed in Germany after the Second World War, so in 1946, when similar numbers of people immigrated to Germany, and within a very short time frame, people constructed 4 million dwelling units in Germany, in a completely destroyed country, within 10 years. And we looked at that. We looked at where the people were in 1946 and at the solutions in urban planning. And, well, the example that we looked at was called Königsberger Straße. And if you have an aerial view on these structures, they all look the same. So this was one of the models of the planners. It's the housing estates. And we came up with our project, the free movement of migrants, of people who go into the big cities, and we develop new housing estates within the cities that are meant to form themselves, to constitute themselves. We constructed a model in a scale of 1 to 600, and here we have those 4 sites, those 4 plots. We searched for them, and we had some basic criteria so that they are not far away from the main station, that they are not too expensive, and etc. And there is a certain flexibility. Other things can be in the vicinity, like supermarkets and other things for which we do not know yet if they will be built there or not. And so we have these areas in the cities. The size of them is about 10 hectares, and they are very specific. And we wanted them to be relatively autonomous. And we looked at some central rules of urban planning, like for instance in Munich, where we have these 2 large roads, and this is in a more rural area. This is relatively far away from the big city. There are some fields. In the city of Leipzig, this is in the city center, which is very close to the city center, the Bavarian station, as it is called. So these are empty spaces that are available in Leipzig. So this is the wrong picture, I'm sorry. This is Duisburg, where we have this huge yard. And, well, I'm sorry, this is a bit mixed up here. This is in Hamburg, the smallest building site where we have, well, this is Leipzig here, where you can see these older buildings that are integrated in the new structure, and this is the yard in the Hamburg project. And if I have still 2 minutes left, we build these models, and we used or we devised buildings types that have a hybrid origin. So we have these large kind of patio houses, which we considered as a part of a universalist principle. And they allow to be transformed in different ways and can be appropriated in different ways through self-building, through adaptation of the floor plans, through adaptation of the facades, because in each case the house is only half finished. And we then show these different examples of the half-finished houses. We try to plan these half-finished houses in different examples. There are different types, and I'm going through them very quickly. There's this very large model, and there is this example of a stack of row houses. And they are openly usable, and they offer space for 3 families or 3 groups of people. There are these houses with a yard in the middle, and they are extensible. So there is a small basic unit that can be extended. And this is what it looks like from inside. And from the outside, what is not built is this unit here. There are double-story units where you have a high living room that can also be used as a working room. Then there are these large row houses, and they open up several possibilities for the use because you can combine them in different ways. And from the outside, they look like this. And here is, again, a building or buildings which create their own space, and where you could find different sorts of trade shops in the ground floor stories. And from the outside, it looks like this. And there is a whole series of extensions or transformations that are developed from this type of building. And here you can see buildings that are residential and working buildings, and so high, large storage heights. And there are those combined types that are kind of conglomerates, and they offer spaces for living and spaces for working. And there are these types of buildings, cone-formed buildings, or buildings with different heights, like this large housing estate in Leipzig. And from the outside, you enter an inner yard, and on the backside, there's another high building, so that this becomes a neighborhood in itself. And this was all from me. Thank you.